All right, let's dive into the world of construction project delivery methods. All that crucial behind-the-scenes stuff that happens before any actual construction begins.
Exactly.
Like imagine you've got this incredible project in mind, maybe it's your dream home,
Mm,
a super modern office building,
right.
even a new library for your community.
Yeah.
Before you even start thinking about paint colors or what kind of furniture you want,
Hmm.
you got to make this big decision.
Huge. Yeah.
How is this project actually going to get built?
It's really interesting because it's not just about coming up with an awesome design.
Right.
It's also about how you actually execute that design, how you make it a reality.
Yeah, so like what's the best strategy to actually bring that design to life?
You got it. And that's where this whole concept of project delivery comes in. It's basically the framework that determines how everything from design to construction is going to unfold. And the method you choose has a big impact on everything.
I bet.
The timeline, your budget, the risks involved, even the overall quality of the final building.
So it's like choosing the right roadmap before you set off on a journey.
Exactly.
Like the wrong roadmap, it can lead you in all sorts of wrong directions.
Yeah.
Some serious detours and delays, right?
You got it. Detours, roadblocks, you name it. And just there's no one-size-fits-all roadmap for every journey. There's no
Yeah.
one-size-fits-all approach to project delivery.
Gotcha.
There are actually a bunch of different methods, each with their own strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
best suited for different types of projects and situations.
Okay, so what are some of those different methods? Like what's in the toolbox?
Well, we got the trusty old design bid build,
Okay.
the more collaborative construction management approach, the super streamlined design build method, and then some more specialized methods like public-private partnerships, or P3s as they're called, and the increasingly popular integrated project delivery.
That's a mouthful. All right, so let's unpack all that.
Sure.
Let's start with what sounds like the most familiar route, design bid build. I feel like I've heard that term before, but honestly, I couldn't really explain it to someone like, what does that actually mean?
It's the classic approach, kind of like the textbook way of doing things, and probably the one that most people naturally gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it this way. You hire an architect to create the design for your project.
Okay.
Then you send those plans out to several different contractors who bid on the construction, and you pick the one with the lowest bid to actually build it.
Sounds pretty simple. You get the design, find the cheapest builder, and you're good to go.
Yeah, it seems straightforward, but that simplicity can sometimes be deceiving.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, while design bid build does offer a lot of clarity in terms of roles, and you usually get a fixed price up front,
Right.
it can also create a kind of separation between the designer and the builder.
Okay.
Like they're working in their own little bubbles.
So not much communication between the two.
Not ideal, and that lack of communication can lead to problems down the line, which can end up costing you time and money.
That makes sense. So if the architect and the contractor aren't on the same page from the start, you're bound to run into some snags along the way, right?
Exactly. Picture this. You're building a school, and during construction, the contractor discovers some unexpected soil conditions that weren't accounted for in the original design.
Oh.
Now you got to go back to the architect, get revised drawings, get new bids from the contractor. It can create a whole domino effect of delays and cost overruns.
Ouch. And that's exactly what you don't want when you're trying to stay on budget and on schedule.
You got it.
And I'm guessing that always going with the lowest bidder doesn't necessarily guarantee the best quality either, does it?
You're right, that's another potential downside.
Uh-huh.
You might end up with a contractor who cuts corners to meet that low bid,
Mhm.
which could impact the quality of the building, its durability, or even its safety in the long run.
So you get what you pay for.
Sometimes, yes.
So if design bid build isn't always the ideal approach, what are some alternatives that might be better options?
Great question. Well, that's where construction management comes in.
Okay.
Think of it as bringing in a seasoned expert, a construction manager,
Right.
to guide you through the entire process.
So like a construction Sherpa leading the expedition up the mountain.
I like that analogy. A construction manager brings their expertise to the table right from the design phase,
Mm-hmm.
advising on costs, constructability, and scheduling. And then during construction, they act as the liaison between you, the owner, the architect, and all the different contractors, making sure everyone's on the same page and everything runs smoothly.
So they're like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure all the musicians are in sync and playing the same tune.
That's a great way to put it, but it's important to note that not all construction managers are created equal.
Oh, so?
There are actually two main types. Construction management for services, where the CM is primarily an advisor and coordinator.
Uh-huh.
And then there's construction management for services and construction, sometimes called at risk, where the CM takes on more responsibility, potentially becoming the general contractor themselves.
So with the at-risk model, the construction manager is kind of putting their money where their mouth is. They're
Exactly.
not just giving advice, they're also taking on some of the financial risk if things go wrong.
Right. And choosing between these two models often depends on how complex the project is and how much control the owner wants to have over the day-to-day decisions.
That makes sense. Like if you were building a super innovative, eco-friendly school,
Exactly.
a construction manager at risk might be a really good fit because they could bring all their expertise and sustainable building practices and really manage that project effectively from start to finish.
You got it.
It sounds like having a construction manager involved in whatever capacity adds an extra layer of expertise and coordination to the project.
For sure.
But I'm guessing that expertise comes at a price.
It does. Hiring a construction manager adds another fee to the overall project budget. And it also means you have another person at the table, which can make the decision-making process a little more complex.
Right, more voices, more opinions.
Exactly. So it's really about weighing the benefits of their expertise against that added cost and that potential for more intricate communication.
Okay, I'm following you. So we've talked about the classic design bid build
Yeah.
and the more collaborative construction management approach.
Right.
What other paths are there in this construction landscape?
Well, another increasingly popular option is design build.
Okay.
It's a much more streamlined approach where you basically hire a single entity that's responsible for both the design and the construction of your project.
One-stop shopping.
Exactly.
And it's incredibly efficient.
It can be.
No more back and forth between the architect and the contractor.
Right. Way less chance of miscommunication.
But isn't there a risk of sacrificing design quality in the name of speed and saving money?
That's a valid concern, and it's one of the reasons why design build isn't the perfect fit for every project. If you're building something fairly straightforward, a standard warehouse,
Right.
a typical office building where the design isn't the main focus, design build can be a great option. But
What? Here comes the catch.
yeah, but if you're really passionate about specific design elements,
Well,
or your project has some very unique or complex requirements, handing over complete design control to the design build entity might not be the best move.
right, because you don't want your vision for the project to get lost in the process.
Exactly.
So what's the solution if you want that efficiency of design build, but you also want to maintain some control over the design?
In those cases, you might consider hiring what's called an advocate architect.
Advocate architect, what's that?
It's basically an independent architect,
Okay.
separate from the design build team,
Ah,
who represents your interests throughout the entire process.
yeah, okay.
Making sure your vision is being translated into the design and that the quality isn't being compromised.
So it's like having your own personal design consultant in your corner,
You got it.
making sure your ideas are heard.
Exactly. And that's especially important in design build where things can get a bit blurred,
Oh.
between who's responsible for what.
Uh-huh.
So that advocate architect really acts as a check and balance, making sure the owner's voice is heard loud and clear.
I like it. Anyway, so far we've covered design bid build, construction management, and design build.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier some other specialized methods as well.
Right.
What about public-private partnerships? What are those all about?
Those are usually reserved for those really big infrastructure projects.
Okay.
Things like bridges, highways, tunnels, even public hospitals.
Those huge projects.
Yeah, projects with big price tags and ones that have a long-term impact on the community.
Right. They got to last.
Yeah, and public-private partnerships, or P3s as they're often called, basically bring in private sector financing and expertise to these big, complex projects.
So it's like a joint venture
You got it.
between the government and private companies to get these massive projects done.
Exactly. Imagine a city that has an old bridge
Okay.
that's falling apart and desperately needs to be replaced.
Right.
A P3 could bring in a private company to finance the design and construction of that new bridge and maybe even operate and maintain it for a certain period of time.
Oh, interesting.
This can be a win-win
I see how.
because the public sector, they get their much-needed infrastructure, and the private sector gets a long-term investment opportunity.
Makes sense.
But it's worth noting that P3s can be a little bit controversial
Oh, why is that?
because they do involve these really long-term financial commitments.
Okay.
And there's potential for less public oversight of how things are done.
I see. So transparency and accountability can be an issue.
Sometimes, yes. So while P3s can be a really effective tool for tackling big infrastructure projects, they do require careful planning and a solid contract to make sure that everyone's interests are protected.
Okay, so we've explored design, bid, build.
Right.
We've talked about construction management, we've covered design build, even ventured into the world of P3s.
Yep.
You mentioned one more method that sounded kind of intriguing, integrated project delivery.
Ah, yes, IPD. Now, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, lay on me.
Integrated project delivery is all about creating a truly collaborative environment
Okay.
where everyone involved, the owner,
Uh-huh.
the architect,
Right.
the contractor, and even key subcontractors work together as one unified team right from the very beginning.
That's like next level teamwork.
It is, and with IPD, everyone shares in the risks and rewards.
Oh, okay.
So there's a real sense of shared ownership over the project's success.
Gotcha. So like if we were building that super innovative, eco-friendly school with IPD, the architect, the contractor, all the sustainability consultants would be working side by side from day one,
Exactly.
brainstorming ideas, figuring out potential challenges, coming up with creative solutions together.
You got it.
That sounds awesome, like a dream team scenario
It can be.
where everybody's on the same page, working towards the same goals.
Exactly.
But be honest, is this IPD utopia actually possible in the real world?
It's definitely not a magic bullet.
Right.
IPD requires a really high level of trust,
Okay.
open communication, and a willingness to try new things.
Like changing the whole culture of how construction projects are typically done.
Exactly. It's not for everyone, and it's certainly not the right fit for every project.
Uh-huh.
But when it works, it can lead to some really impressive results.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From that traditional design bid build to the super collaborative IPD. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, are there any other project delivery methods out there that we should at least mention?
There are a few more specialized approaches that we can touch on briefly.
Okay, hit me.
There's project management, which involves outsourcing the overall project oversight to an expert firm.
Uh-huh.
There's turnkey development, where you essentially get a finished product from a single developer, and that includes things like site acquisition and financing.
Okay.
There's cost plus, where you pay for the actual cost plus a fee on top, which can be good for those projects where things are a little bit unpredictable. And then there's unit rates, which involves setting fixed prices per unit of work, and that's common in a lot of civil engineering projects.
All right, so it's clear there are a ton of options to choose from.
There are.
And picking the right project delivery method is a big deal. It's not a decision to make lightly.
Absolutely not. And as we've seen, there's no one best way to do things.
Right.
It all comes down to your specific project. You know its needs and goals, how complex the design is, the owner's priorities, and how much risk they're comfortable with.
My head's spinning a little bit, but this has been super helpful. I'm starting to see how choosing the right project delivery method can really set the stage for either smooth sailing or a really bumpy ride.
For sure.
So before we move on to the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
any final words of wisdom for our listeners who might be about to embark on a construction venture of their own?
Yeah, I'd say take some time to think about what really matters most to you in this project. Is it speed? Is it making sure you stay on budget? Do you need a lot of control over the design? Is collaboration really important to you, or is minimizing risk your top priority?
That's a great point.
Answering those questions will really help you figure out which project delivery method is the best fit for you and your goals for the project.
Great advice. And for anyone who's eager to explore this world of construction project delivery even further, stay tuned. We'll be back with part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll really dig into the details of each of these methods and help you figure out which one might be the right one for your next project.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into construction project delivery methods.
We've covered a lot of ground already,
Yeah, we have.
but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. Like there's so much more to explore.
There is, and I think it'd be helpful to kind of zoom out for a second
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture. Let's talk about this concept of a design construction program.
Okay, program like a computer program.
Sure.
Are we getting super high tech now?
Not exactly. In construction, a design construction program is basically the whole process of creating a new facility or renovating an existing one.
Okay.
It includes everything from the initial design concept to the actual construction, and it's about making sure those two phases work together seamlessly.
So it's like a big symphony where the design and the construction are two movements that have to flow together smoothly.
That's a great way to put it. And just like an orchestra needs a conductor to lead the way, a design construction program needs a program manager.
Makes sense. So who usually takes on that role? You know, the person who makes sure everyone's on the same page and the project stays on track.
It depends, but typically it's the owner of the project, the client representative.
Okay.
Sometimes the architect takes on that role, or a specialized project management firm might be brought in.
Gotcha. Sounds like a big job.
It can be.
Speaking of jobs, I'm kind of curious about the architect's role in all of this.
Okay.
Like, does it change depending on which project delivery method is being used?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. The architect's role can vary depending on the project delivery method, but one thing always remains constant:
What's that?
their responsibility to protect the public's best interests.
Okay, so they're not just designing aesthetically pleasing buildings. They're also thinking about the safety and well-being of the people who will be using those buildings.
That's exactly right. Whether it's design, bid, build, construction management, or any other method, the architect has to make sure that the building is safe, it's functional, meets all the building codes and regulations, and ultimately serves the community's needs.
That makes a lot of sense. But so I'm guessing the way they interact with other key players, like the contractor, can change quite a bit depending on how the project's being delivered.
You're absolutely right. Let's think about design, bid, build for a minute.
Okay.
In that traditional model, the architect has a direct contract with the owner, but the contractor doesn't come into the picture until later after the design is done. And that can sometimes create a disconnect between the design phase and the construction phase.
Right, like we talked about those communication breakdowns earlier. It's almost like the architect finishes composing the music, hands it over to the orchestra, and then the conductor's like, wait, these notes are impossible to play.
That's a perfect analogy, and those kinds of disconnects can lead to changes in the plans, delays, even disputes, which can get expensive.
So how does the architect's role change when you bring a construction manager into the mix, like in construction management?
With construction management, the architect and the construction manager work much more closely together throughout the design process. The CM can provide input on things like constructability, costs, scheduling early on, which helps avoid those surprises and conflicts down the road.
Got you. So it's more like the architect and the conductor are composing the music together, making sure it's both beautiful and playable.
Exactly. It's a much more integrated approach, which usually leads to a smoother construction process and a better final product.
I like it. Now, what about design build?
Okay.
We talked about how efficient it can be to have one entity handling both the design and construction.
Right.
But if the architect is working for the design builder, then who's really looking out for the owner's best interests when it comes to the design?
That's a great point, and that's where an advocate architect can come in handy.
Right, our design bodyguard.
Exactly. The owner can hire their own independent architect separate from the design build team to be their advocate and make sure their design vision isn't lost in the process.
So the advocate architect basically represents the owner's interests during the design build process, making sure the design meets their needs and that quality isn't being sacrificed.
Exactly.
That's good to know. It seems like there are ways to mitigate some of those potential risks and downsides that we've been talking about.
There are, and another key factor in managing those risks and making sure the project is successful is the contract between everyone involved. The type of contract used can really impact how risks are allocated, how payments are made, and the overall dynamics of the project.
Right. Contracts, they're the backbone of any construction project.
They are.
But I have to admit, they can be a little intimidating to try to understand. Can you break down some of the different types of construction contracts and how they fit into these different project delivery methods?
Of course, let's start with the most common type, the stipulated price contract, also known as a lump sum contract.
Okay.
This is typically used in design bid build projects where the contractor agrees to complete the work for a fixed price.
Okay.
Based on those detailed design documents that the architect puts together.
So it's like a fixed price agreement. Seems pretty straightforward. But what happens if unexpected problems come up during construction and the original plans need to be changed?
That's where change orders come in.
Change orders.
Yep. They basically allow for adjustments to the contract price and the scope of work if they're necessary.
Makes sense.
But they can also be a source of conflict.
Oh, how so?
Well, if they're not managed carefully, like if the owner and the contractor have different ideas about what a necessary change is, things can get messy pretty quickly.
I bet. So clear communication and documentation are super important throughout the entire project.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to those change orders.
Okay, so we've got stipulated price contracts.
Right.
What other kinds are there?
Well, another common type is the cost plus contract.
Okay, what's that?
It's often used for projects where the scope of work isn't completely clear at the beginning or when there's a lot of uncertainty.
Okay.
So instead of a fixed price, the contractor is reimbursed for their actual costs, plus an additional fee on top.
So when would that type of contract be a good choice? Seems like it could get expensive quickly.
You're right. Cost-plus contracts do require careful tracking of all the costs, but they can be the best option for certain projects.
Like what kind of projects?
Complex renovations, where you might not know the full extent of the work until you start tearing down walls, or projects with really tight deadlines where the design and construction are happening simultaneously.
So cost plus contracts offer more flexibility, but you really got to keep a close eye on the budget.
For sure.
Now, what about those massive infrastructure projects that we talked about earlier, the ones that are often financed through public-private partnerships?
Right.
Do they use those standard contract types?
P3 projects usually have more complex customized contracts
Right.
that address the specific financial and operational arrangements between the public and private partners, and these contracts are often negotiated on a project-by-project basis.
That's complicated.
They can be.
So the main takeaway here is that the type of contract used plays a huge role in how the project delivery process unfolds. It's not just about the physical construction. It's about the legal and financial framework, too.
You got it. And speaking of frameworks, we've been focusing a lot on the technical and contractual side of things.
Right.
But there's another critical element that's often overlooked: the culture of collaboration.
Collaboration, that's a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
But seriously, it does seem like teamwork is super important in construction.
It's essential. A project where everyone's working in isolation, only focused on their own little piece of the puzzle, that's not going to lead to the best outcomes.
Right, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of open communication, trust, and shared goals.
So it's not just about having everyone in the same room physically. It's about creating an environment where they feel comfortable sharing ideas, raising concerns, and working together to solve problems.
Precisely. And that's especially important in those more collaborative delivery methods like integrated project delivery, where everyone's literally working under the same contract,
Right.
sharing in both the risks and the rewards.
Speaking of IPD, that sounds like the ultimate form of collaborative construction.
It can be, but it requires a pretty big shift in mindset.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's about moving away from those traditional adversarial relationships that you often see in construction and embracing a truly collaborative approach.
This whole conversation about collaboration really highlights the human side of construction.
For sure.
It's not just about blueprints and building materials.
Nope.
It's about people working together to bring a vision to life.
Absolutely. And when that collaboration is successful, the results can be amazing.
Right, so we have explored different project delivery methods, talked about the importance of contracts, collaboration,
Right.
even touched on how the architect's role can change.
Right.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm wondering if there are any new trends or innovations on the horizon that might change the future of construction.
That's a great question, and one that definitely deserves its own deep dive episode.
I agree.
But I can give you a sneak peek at some of the exciting stuff that's starting to gain traction in the industry.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the future of construction look like?
Well, one of the most significant trends is the rise of technology, especially building information modeling, or BIM.
BIM. I've heard that term before, but I don't really know what it is or how it works.
Imagine a virtual 3D model of a building that has every single detail about its design, the materials, all the systems, even how it's expected to perform over its lifespan.
Whoa. So it's like a digital twin of the building with all the information you could ever need.
That's a great way to put it, and this digital model allows for better coordination between everyone involved.
Okay.
You can spot potential clashes or problems early on, estimate costs more accurately, even simulate the construction sequence virtually.
That's wild. It's like bringing the whole construction process into a computer.
That's the idea.
So what other tech advancements are shaping the construction world?
Another trend we're seeing is the growth of prefabrication and modular construction.
It's that.
That's where building components are manufactured off-site in a factory setting,
Okay.
and then they're assembled on-site.
Interesting.
It can really speed up construction time, improve quality control, and reduce waste.
It's like building with giant Lego blocks.
Kinda, yeah. And this approach works really well for projects that have a lot of repetitive elements, like hospitals, hotels, student housing.
I can see how that would be super efficient. What else is on the horizon?
Sustainability and resilience are becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, those are big topics these days.
There's a growing demand for buildings that are energy efficient, use eco-friendly materials, can withstand natural disasters, and have a positive impact on the environment.
It's great to see the construction industry moving towards a more sustainable future.
It is, and all of these trends are connected. BIM, can help us design buildings that perform better and produce less waste.
Uh-huh.
And prefabrication and modular construction can contribute to those sustainability goals.
So it's all coming together.
It is. It's an exciting time to be involved in the world of construction. There's innovation happening everywhere you look.
This has been incredible. We've demystified those complicated project delivery methods,
Good.
explored the importance of contracts and collaboration,
Uh-huh.
even got a glimpse of what the future holds.
Yep.
It's clear that the construction world is always changing, and staying informed is essential for anyone who's involved in making those buildings a reality.
I couldn't agree more. Whether you're an architect, a contractor, a developer, or just someone who's passionate about the built environment, understanding these trends can help you make better decisions and contribute to a more sustainable and resilient future.
This deep dive has been amazing,
It has.
and I'm already looking forward to our next exploration of this fascinating world.
Me too.
But for now, let's give our listeners a moment to process all this information
Yeah. It's been a lot to take in.
and maybe reflect on what they've learned.
Hopefully this deep dive has sparked some curiosity and giving you a better understanding of how complex construction project delivery can be.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into construction project delivery.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From that good old design bid build to the super innovative integrated project delivery.
We have, and everything in between too, right?
Everything, contracts, the importance of good collaboration. We even touched on what the future might hold for construction with those trends like BIM and prefabrication.
Yeah, it's been a real journey. But now it's time to bring it all together
Exactly.
and answer that big question, the one everyone's probably thinking.
How do you actually pick the right project delivery method for your specific project? Because we've seen that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right, it's not like there's some magic formula or a simple flow chart that just spits out the perfect answer. It's more about carefully thinking about all these different factors, right?
It's more like trying to solve a puzzle where every piece is a different aspect of your project.
Okay, so what are some of those key puzzle pieces then? What are the things people should be thinking about when making this big decision?
Well, the first piece is understanding your project's specific needs and goals. What are you really hoping to achieve? What are your top priorities?
So like, is it speed? Is it keeping costs under control? Do you want to have a lot of say in the design? Is sustainability a big deal? Or is it all about minimizing risk?
All those things are super important to consider. Like if speed is your top priority, design build could be a good choice because it can lead to faster completion times.
But if you're really passionate about having a lot of control over the design build might not be the best fit because you're giving up some of that control.
Right, exactly. That's why being clear about what's most important to you right from the start is key. The next puzzle piece is how complex your project actually is.
So a really simple, straightforward project might be a good candidate for design bid build, while something more complex with unique needs might benefit from having a construction manager involved.
That's it. And then there's how much risk you're comfortable with.
Risk, always a factor.
Always. Some methods like design bid build give you more certainty upfront about costs, but might mean more risk if unexpected things happen during construction.
While other methods like construction management at risk shift some of that risk over to the construction manager.
Exactly. It's all about trade-offs.
Like most things in life.
And it's important to carefully think through those trade-offs. Another big piece of the puzzle is how much collaboration you're looking for.
Okay, so if you really love working in a super collaborative environment and want everyone working as one big team, integrated project delivery might be the way to go.
But if you prefer a more traditional approach where everyone has their own clear roles and responsibilities, design bid build or construction management could be better choices.
This is starting to make sense. It's like a big decision matrix with all these factors to consider.
That's a good way to visualize it. And don't forget about the importance of experience and expertise.
Yeah, having the right team is just as important as choosing the right delivery method, right?
Absolutely. You want to make sure your team has the experience and the know-how to really navigate the path you choose successfully.
So if you're about to start a construction project, don't just jump into the first method that comes to mind.
Definitely not. Take your time, really think through all those factors, and do your research.
Ask a lot of questions. And don't be afraid to get advice from people who've been there and done that.
Totally, this stuff can be complicated. There's no need to try to figure it all out on your own.
Well, here we are at the end of our deep dive into construction project delivery.
It's been quite a journey.
We've really explored a lot, from those basic ideas to the trends that are shaping the future of the industry.
And hopefully, we've given you the tools to understand this complex world a bit better and make those tough decisions with confidence.
Whether you're building your dream house, a super modern office building, or even a huge bridge, picking the right project delivery method is crucial.
It really sets the stage for everything that follows.
So as we wrap up, we encourage everyone listening to keep exploring this fascinating world of construction.
Keep learning, asking questions, and stay curious.
Because the world of construction is always evolving and changing.
There's always something new to discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we hope you'll subscribe to hear more about this fascinating world and how to navigate it successfully.